Okay, let's just jump right in. Have you ever paused your TV just to read a text message and suddenly the absolute quiet of your living room felt, well, almost deafening? If you're nodding right now, you are definitely not alone. In this explainer, we're unpacking the psychological blueprint of silence anxiety. We're going to figure out exactly what's happening in your nervous system when the noise finally stops.
Think about it. When you walk into a totally quiet room, do you get that visceral, almost instant urge to flick on the TV or fire up a podcast or just put on some background music so you can actually function? Look, we usually brush this off, right? We tell ourselves, oh, I just like having something on while I fold laundry. But psychology tells us there's a much deeper, far more complex reason your mind is fundamentally uncomfortable with the quiet.
See, the disconnect is wild. While some people genuinely view total silence as this peaceful, relaxing chance to take a breath, your overthinking brain probably sees it entirely differently. To an anxious mind, silence isn't peaceful at all. It's a heavy weight. It feels deeply suspicious and completely loaded with stress. It's kind of like waiting for the other shoe to drop, and your brain goes on high alert trying to figure out where that drop is going to come from.
Which leads us right into our first concept, the suspicion of silence. Here's the thing you really need to hear. Your discomfort with silence is not a personality flaw, and it's certainly not a weakness. Psychologists actually identify this as a learned psychological blueprint. Background noise is literally acting as a shield for you against your own internal chaos. Over time, your brain basically learned that constant auditory input is a strict requirement to feel grounded and to stay safe from the overwhelming rush of your own unfiltered thoughts.
And that brings us to chasing mental closure. What exactly is your brain searching for when the room goes completely dark and quiet?
Well, it comes down to a core behavioral trait. The human mind absolutely hates unfinished answers. We are evolutionary meaning makers, you know? We crave information, feedback, resolution, just to feel secure in our environment. So when a room is completely silent, there's zero external feedback coming in. Your brain perceives that sudden lack of input as a severe lack of closure. It's an unfinished answer that it just cannot stand to leave unresolved.
You can actually see this habit loop happen in real time. The very second you enter total silence, your brain registers that lack of feedback, creating this highly uncomfortable gap of uncertainty. And because nature abhors a vacuum, your mind starts overthinking just to find some kind of certainty. It literally generates its own internal noise to regain a sense of control. If the room isn't giving you input, your brain is going to frantically manufacture its own.
So let's explore this psychological shield a bit more. Without the familiar filter of a Spotify playlist or a TV show, silence provides the absolute perfect breeding ground for a mental spiral. Suddenly, your brain starts scanning for recent social mistakes. You catch yourself reviewing yesterday's interactions, wondering things like, did I sound weird in that meeting? Or did I make it awkward when I said goodbye? Silence essentially rips away your protective filter and drops you directly into a spiral of intense self-judgment.
The contrast in how we cope here is fascinating. Total silence is inherently unpredictable, right? It triggers those spirals and leaves you without closure. But background noise, it's incredibly predictable. Applying a familiar repetitive input, like playing a sitcom you've already seen a dozen times, actually physically calms your nervous system. Think of it like vigorously cleaning a messy room to feel a sense of control over a chaotic week. That noise is a tool you're actively using to maintain emotional stability. Let's shift gears a second and look at social scanning and distance. This is a deeper emotional layer. If you grew up in an unpredictable environment, maybe support fluctuated or communication was used as a punishment, your brain likely became hyper-aware of social signals. To you, a quiet room isn't just an absence of acoustics. Your brain automatically interprets that silence as terrifying social distance. It feels like the silent treatment or outright rejection. You've literally been conditioned to read the quiet as a glaring sign that something is terribly wrong. Just take a moment and let this sink in. Being ignored comes quietly. It's a powerful psychological reality. Because your brain learned early on that being pushed aside or overlooked happens without a single sound, total silence triggers an incredibly deep, visceral fear. It isn't just an empty room. To your nervous system, it's a very real, very present threat to your social survival.
So the crucial point here is that you aren't actually afraid of the lack of sound. What you're facing is the underlying fear of being quietly swapped out or forgotten by those around you. Your brain strongly associates silence with social isolation. And honestly, that isolation is what you're truly trying to avoid when you scramble for the TV remote.
Which brings us to our next insight, fleeing fake scenarios. When left alone with your thoughts in the quiet, your brain engages in what psychologists call mental stimulations. You know the feeling? You retreat into imagining completely fake scenarios, or you find yourself winning imaginary arguments in the shower that never even happened. Why does it do this? It's an attempt to feel prepared for the future. But while it starts as a defense mechanism, it almost always devolves into an exhausting habit loop of pure, unfiltered anxiety.
And this completely reframes why you constantly need that background noise. It isn't just a mindless distraction or a short attention span. Drowning out that internal chaos is actually highly functional. It prevents you from losing focus, it stops those exhausting fake arguments in their tracks, and it disconnects the anxiety loop. That podcast playing in the background, it's not a distraction. It's keeping you safely anchored to reality.
Finally, let's move to a compassionate reframe.
The biggest takeaway from all of this is that your mind is not working against you. It is just trying its absolute hardest to protect you from the deep uncertainty it feels in the quiet gaps of your day. So the next time you feel that desperate urge to fill an empty room with sound, don't judge yourself so harshly. Just remember, your mind is simply executing a highly effective, learned protective mechanism to keep you feeling stable and safe.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought to chew on. Today, when you instinctively reach for your headphones or turn on the TV just to have some company in the room, ask yourself, what is your background noise actually protecting you from? Because once you understand these underlying psychological patterns, I promise you'll never look at silence or yourself the same way again.